Take it away. Right. I know, right? Guys,
my favorite part is that Todd is apparently still in the future.
Yes.
I know exactly what's gonna. So this is actually gonna be a failure.
How come those two words don't have snapping?
I apologize in advance.
Yeah, you could do that with CSS, you know.
All right, CSS. Whatever I has to do this, I was told, because I can probably lose you. I can just go into it, or I can stay top level, and I was told to stay top level. So if you guys already know some of the stuff, fine. If not, then you'll probably learn something, and that's what we're here for. So CSS, you think you know, but you have no idea. Remember Cribs, MTV? They always used to say that. Tiffany said nobody ever get it. Real world. Yeah, there we go. All right, what is CSS? A lot of people would say that HTML is used to structure your document so that browsers will read semantically what your content is, and that CSS is there to style it. They're wrong. CSS is freaking everything. It holds together the very fabric of space and time. I was watching the Cosmos. Keep going. I was watching the Cosmos with Neil deGrasse Tyson, and string theory and gravitational pull and whatnot. In the credits, it actually said also CSS could probably be one of the things that hold together space and time. I wouldn't ever say anything so silly. And I am not kidding. I saw that. So one of the things that drives me insane about other people's code is everybody gets CSS specificity wrong, and you might not even know what that is yet, but you probably get it wrong. And it's probably the best way to explain what specificity is just to go ahead and just jump into it. So let's say you have a simple list, right? So you're talking about your summer drinks, and you want to say what your favorite summer drink is, and it's not going to be mint julep or wheat beer. So you stick a little class of favorite right there, so you can so you have a hook that you can style to see what your favorite beer is, right? So there's your hook, there's your favorite, and you say color red. Bold. And nothing happens. And that's because somebody out there messed with specificity. And it will literally ruin my week whenever you guys mess with this. So I'm going to show you how not to do that, right? So the reason why that didn't work is because you start poking around the CSS and somebody wrote some kind of header, some kind of way to target it like that. So instead of just hitting favorite in a class like it should be, somebody went and did a UL, which is also bad, gave it a class, and then hit the LI. So you're a lot more specific. It's actually specificity is more like how many fingers are pointing at what you're looking at, and not how close the CSS selector is to your element or anything like that. So that's the problem right there. And so it's fine.
You sure that's the problem?
So you got two different CSS selectors telling the text what to do. It doesn't know what to do, so the browser decides to figure out what it is, and it's going to choose the one that's more specific. And most of this confuses some beginners because they haven't quite got it figured out yet. And like I was saying, they might think that the favorite statement is, since it's further down in the CSS, like that's going to be the one that hits it. Or because, but anyway, it doesn't matter. This is some of the crap that I've seen. Like literally, this is what I've seen come out of some of the places I've worked. And so you're gonna, and this will actually ruin my week. So I'd like to say be as specific as it makes sense to be. And so instead of hitting HTML body div with the ID of page wrap with the UL with the, people do this. But that's way over the top. It makes your CSS a lot harder to read, and it yields no benefits. It also forces people to use the important declaration, which, that just adds to the mess. And so it just makes it worse, and you're just going to end up just writing a big hodgepodge of crap at the end of it. And there's a few ways to calculate specificity. I'm probably going too fast. I'm probably going to blow through. Anyway.
You have to talk for the next 35 to 40 minutes. So.
Well, there's a good bit.
If you want to start telling us personal stories, that's fine. maybe your likes, dislikes, stuff.
All right, and with specificity,
But you're on the hook for 45 minutes.
I've never had a problem with it because it just makes sense. How many fingers are pointing at it, and you just don't. I've never really had a problem with it. Didn't even know there was a thing until I started hitting other people's code, really. And if you want to, you can actually calculate it out. It's pretty simple. Just if an element has an inline styling, it's automatically 1, right? And so for each ID, right, and for each class value, the pseudo, I'm just joking, nobody does this. And then you can generally take all those numbers, and 1,000 is going to beat 100 anyway. Or you can think about it like this. So you have 1 stormtrooper, right? Not bad. You got 2 stormtroopers. That's going to trump the 1 stormtrooper. Darth Vader. And those are just elements. Darth Vader is actually a class. 1 class is going to trump even 2 stormtroopers. And so you have a stormtrooper and a class. So you have an element and a class. Now that's going to, of course, and you see where this is going?
Now, is that true if the class declaration is above the stormtroopers?
Yeah,
It would still do Darth Vader, not the stormtroopers?
Yeah, this is the hierarchy. You can imagine, instead of being in line, they're more staggered. But this is how you would write it. So it would be the PA, and then you give it classes right here.
So I'm saying, say you had your stormtrooper and your Darth Vader. Your Darth Vader got written first in your CSS. Then you wrote the stormtrooper. It would still pick up the Darth Vader over the stormtrooper?
Well, in your CSS, if this is inside of it, it would just be the tree of links. Is that what you're saying?
No.
He's asking the question whether or not the order that they come in.
The line
In your
number.
CSS.
The line number.
The answer is
It
No.
doesn't change your specificity, the order.
No, it does not. No. And then you have 2 Vaders. What am I talking about anymore? Specificity. Something about Vader.
There can only ever be 2 times. One faster and one faster.
And so to get around all that, and this is pretty much what I'm trying to get at, to get around all that, you're going to want to, instead of carpet bombing your selectors, you want to just shoot to kill. And so, and again, this drives me insane. One of the biggest mistakes I see that literally drives me insane is whenever people do that, they carpet bomb their selectors. And these are actually pretty decent. The one I showed you, what started at body or page wrap, and they're 15. Literally, I've seen people, it just ruins my day. Anyway, so instead of hitting, carpet bombing, so instead of hitting UL, you might as well just say main, the header of the UL. If that's going to be your main nav, just give the UL a class of main nav, and that's where you start targeting it from. Otherwise, you're going to run into problems, and I'll show you why in a second. So instead of widget H2, did you really mean, was it supposed to be a title? Because then just give it widget title. And along the same lines as, article, the first article of the first paragraph, instead of going that route, you just give it a class name. It's all about, CSS is all about classes. Even though I know you developers like to write with IDs, it's all about classes. Please don't use IDs, ever. Unless it's something for you guys. I don't want to tell you how to do your job. But please, for me and my job, don't use IDs.
Can I read that Get a little bit confused. The first half of specificity.
Yeah.
What you're actually arguing is that for default HTML elements,
Yeah.
don't target those as the lead-in for your CSS.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I'm gonna get to that. Don't ever use the elements as. Don't ever target just an article or a div. I mean, it might as well just be saying div, class, background, red, and every div is going to be. You have a background of red, right? And so every time you're going to have to overwrite that, you're going to have to give that div another class name just to overwrite that original class name of red. So, and that's what essentially you're doing when you target the actual elements, especially the HTML5 elements, because you're going to reuse those. And so if you target them somewhere, I'm going to have to overwrite your code just to get that, to get how I want, and that drives me.
And from the definition of specificity, you mean that UL is not specific or is too specific?
That would be not specific at all enough. And unless, of course, and I'll show you, there are exceptions to that, these rules, and I'll get to that.
So I have a question. Isn't ID the most specific?
Yeah, and that's why you don't have to use, you don't have to go so far as to drop the atomic bomb of an ID. I've never had to use an ID ever, like had to. So
avoid a DOM element in class.
Yes,
By default, nominal.
always.
Now in my mindset, CSS is designed for broad declaration of style. So class would be the most universal. That way you could use that same class on multiple things so that everything gets the same style and you can style all in one spot. It sounds like you are a proponent for that. And when you start getting specific IDs of stuff, then they could only be used on that one ID ever, so therefore you're losing the benefit of a centrally defined style for something.
Yeah, as long as you have an idea of what you're doing, as long as you're kind of decent with CSS and have an understanding of especially object-oriented, any kind of programming language, you'll come to quickly realize the benefit of just breaking it all apart, and don't ever use IDs and keep it as freaking modular as possible, and you won't get into any problems. You start throwing IDs or giving too many classes to one thing and you're going to run into problems. You're eventually going to have to overwrite that, and there's no sense in overwriting any kind of code, really, if you can help it.
Okay.
So like we were saying about the header, the UL that's just chilling inside the header element. So let's imagine that the UL is the main navigation for your website, like we were talking about, and it lives in the header. And whenever you write it, your CSS, you only mean to have that one UL in your header, and so that's why you write, header UL. And sure, it's sure to work. You'll be able to style it and it'll look good and do what you want. But the minute you throw another header or another UL in there, it's gonna pick up those same classes that, like I was saying, don't ever carpet bomb anything, because then you have to overwrite those classes just to get it to fall down instead of go in line or what have you. It's not very future-proof. It's not explicit enough, and as soon as you add another UL, it will adopt the styling, just like I was saying, which means you have to go back and rewrite the HTML, or you have to go back and just overwrite the CSS, like I was just saying. None of that's good for anybody. But now, like I was saying, there's always around. So if there is always just going to be the one UL, kind of like I'll have the UL. And the way I carpet bomb stuff is I'll have a UL that's primary social. So I'll just have primary social and then target the LI and then the A that way. That's the only time I ever carpet bomb any HTML with my CSS.
Now I will say, Todd, a lot of the people in the room, I'm sure, are not designers. Mm-hmm. So we tend to work with controls that perform a function. We are trying to display a grid. So we will use a control that we will display that grid for us so we can get the functionality of editing the values in the grid or whatever. Those controls, whether they are .NET based or some other library like Telerik or Infragistics, they come with their own styling and their own generated HTML. Do you have guidance what to do in those situations? Because a lot of times we don't, they come with a theme or something. Like Infragistics has a billion themes, and each theme injects its own CSS into the code. So
is it inline code?
Normally occasionally it is.
It's not inline CSS. Sometimes it is.
Occasionally, but most of the time, most good third-party controls will allow for some configurable CSS file that you can then manipulate and change as you need. But I will tell you, I'm defending the people in the room a little bit, that a lot of it's not our fault. Yeah, that's what the control produces.
I can rephrase that a little bit. So basically, they're saying that there's controls that will render out HTML, like an unordered list like that, where you don't have control to put a class on the first LI, then an unordered list. So that's a case where UL LI first child makes sense, but what I would say to that is you probably want to put a class on the control so that at least the container has some specificity into it, where you know that there's no way possible you can put another UL inside that container.
I will say that most controls that we do use have the ability to put a CSS class, but that class gets put on the wrapping container or whatever it is, which is typically a div or a span or something.
Yeah, and that'll allow you to get, that's the hook you need to pretty much target anything from that point on.
So your guidance then possibly could be, is that as we develop these, always use that CSS class attribute of the control, so then a designer or us, because we feel froggy and want to try to break things, use that class to have any specificity and not the ID of the control, which you said is.
Yeah. And you can use the, but most things in web design are just repeatable markup patterns. I see once you have one thing, it's probably going to be used again in the website. And so if you keep it locked to an ID, that's it. So if you stick it on a class, you can use, as long as it's not too. No, you can always use it. You can just use the class over and over again. So that could be your drop down, or that could be your button color and styling or whatever.
Got it.
But yep. So as long as you can hit it from the very closest wrapping parent, that's where I'd start from.
And I don't know if this audience understands that technically you can have a repeating ID, but based on HTML validation, an ID should be unique. It should exist once and once only per page. And you can have the same element on other pages and have the same ID. So that's why he's a proponent of using class as opposed to IDs, because class makes it a reusable style that you can even have on multiple components within a single page. Correct?
Yep. And if you're used to writing JavaScript, a lot of times they're like, well, that's when you'd use your ID, because then something with JavaScript is attached to it. Nowadays they're saying, even don't worry about that, just append JS _ class name, because then you'll know that's JavaScript. Absolutely. Because I say once you make a rule, stick with it. Don't say never use IDs, and then on this just JavaScript we're going to just make a rule and just don't ever use IDs unless you have to. And I mean, you guys, I don't know anything about programming, so.
You say you guys a lot. That's really. I feel targeted.
Those that are smarter than I out there.
Easier.
I feel profiled.
So just think, if you're going to carpet bomb, just have a really good reason to carpet bomb. Otherwise, just target it with a class name and go from there.
Perhaps you should elaborate on the term carpet bomb so that people know exactly what you're referring to.
Yeah, I'm gonna get to reasons
Okay.
when you should use. So do you mean header, and then you're going to target the EM inside your header, or do you just really mean that's your tagline? So what I'm trying to say, or do you mean footer paragraph, or do you mean the copyright? That's what I'm trying to get at. Just shoot them with like a sniper. And do you want sidebar form, or because let's just say there's another form, or do you want search form, primary, auxiliary, what have you? And there are exceptions, sure. So like I was saying, I use primary navigation, and every project I have my primary navigation, because there is just one. It's called primary navigation, and so I'll start with primary navigation, the immediate LI.
Sure, it's not called main nav.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's not main nav.
Yeah, it's too much to type. But if you so in times like that so only go 3 deep. So you got your main nav, you have an LI, and you have an A pretty much, or maybe a span in there, but only go 3 deep. And when you do it, don't type out promo LI A span. All you have to do is promo A, promo LI, promo, and that way you avoid all the specificity problems we were talking about earlier. You don't run into anything if you do it this way.
So in the I guess cascading aspect of CSS, which is redundant, I think. In that case, you have a primary nav, main nav, like your promo, whatever. And then inside there are LIs, and each LI contains an A. You don't necessarily have to. This will pick up any anchor tag inside of the class promo, regardless if it's in the UL or
Yes.
LI. It'll pick up everything inside there.
And so that's, I would say, inheritance. So and also everything inside there will pick up the background color of 323, or at least the container will have that. Can you explain why you had to set the color again on the A tag there? Because I think that's something that people need to understand.
Well, so actually, if you look at my framework, specificity earlier, how so the least specific thing would be your actual element. So somewhere in your style sheet, you would set your A tag right to a color of, let's say, orange, knowing damn well that those are just going to show up in your paragraph tags, all those little A links, because otherwise with content management systems, there's no real good, easy way to just throw a class in there. So that's one of the exceptions. You carpet bomb every single A tag, every single paragraph tag that's going to show up with an underline that links to somewhere else in your paragraph text, your body copy. Just say A, underline of orange, and the text is orange. And since that's just an element and that's the least specific, the minute you attach anything else at all to it, it's going to get overwritten And so that's why.
So my question is more, why does it not pick up the color from promo? Why do you have to set it again on the A?
You know, if I would have put,
what happens if you don't set that color on the A?
What happens with no
color?
CSS at all?
then it'll just be blue like the, oh yeah, that's what you're,
Yeah,
so,
that's right.
so if you don't, well, it's because the default style sheets for every browser will just render that text as blue, and so that's just what you get. So you're gonna have to, even if you hit, I could probably just said color inherit, and that would have picked it up. But so you have to set it again, because in the style sheet of every browser there is a default style that's telling it just to be that blue. That's on every single style sheet. But if you are gonna target it, please don't do the because it's just no sense. No, it saves your fingers. I'm worried about you guys. Yeah, never mind. So any questions so far? So we're going to move on to positioning. Actually, we're going to move on to floats, because I see a lot of heights set, and there's no need for heights. Heights. I just don't understand. I don't understand it.
Took me a second.
Oh, it's a short joke. So I know I kind of went fast. I'm a fast talker anyway. I've been doing it for a long time. It all makes perfect sense to me, but I mean, I can't imagine just sitting there listening to somebody drone on about.
I can't imagine sitting there listening to you. It's very difficult.
Specificity from somebody who.
Trying to help you, guide you, because I can imagine what people understand and what they don't. So.
Any questions from?
I mean, it sounds to me like what you're saying is don't do extraordinarily specific CSS all over the place just to do. Try to use broad strokes when you can and pinpoint when you have to, but think about it before you do it to understand how that class is going to be interpreted and inherited or reused if possible.
And if throwing all caution to the wind, if you just shoot it, if you just hit a selector, just give it a class name and hit it. If for some reason that wasn't the right way to do it, you can just, that's modular, so you can just take that code and just copy and paste it out somewhere else. But I've seen projects where if you just move one thing, it literally all falls apart because it's all, I can't even reproduce it. It's so bad. It does work. Or that IMG thing, that was the most.
Did it functionally work? Did it functionally work? Then I did my job.
Fair.
Serious, but it totally depends on my.
I was like, let's just increase the padding by half an M. Boom, it just fell apart. I'm like, that's insane. Why are all the class names and then one little, is this many class names, like margin 0? It's like, what? I'm sure it wasn't you.
That doesn't sound like me.
I have a question. On your next slide, on the one right before your positioning,
Yeah.
I think you might have said it, maybe I just didn't hear it, but I have a question.
Why was my order?
Yes.
Okay, go back one. Back one more. Okay, so I know you're talking about why you had to set the color there, like to inherit or whatever. If you do like an li there, would it default to the li's default color? Like if you had a blanket li, like color set for li's, and then inside your promo class, you didn't specify, would it grab the default one? Or would it grab the default color for promo?
It would grab if nothing was set here and it wasn't set somewhere else, it would just grab that blue color that's on your.
Okay, so it would grab whatever the default is.
Yeah. Because there's somewhere saying all A's just need to be blue.
Okay. I thought you said that. I just couldn't remember.
So the concept there, though, is you're saying LI, which targets all LIs in there. And if you have an LI within promo, but without a statement that says promo LI, the LI tag is actually more specific in regards to the LI. Because there's nothing that's targeting that.
But if you have an LI set within promo.
Not clear at all.
No, actually, if you have an LI set within the promo class, then it picks up that, like it chunks it and puts that in. If not, it defaults to whatever the next.
Yeah, so if you have LI color equals blue and promo equals white, and then you have and li within promo, it's going to pick up blue. But if you do promo li equals white, then it's going to be white.
Okay,
It's going to override.
I'm gonna do a quick poll, Todd. How many people have been this deep into CSS? Okay, Todd, that will just show you our. I mean, what you're saying is good, but that just gives you an idea. So
I'm feeling better, you know what you're talking about.
You should start off with like CSS.
What's CSS?
What's that?
The CSS fellow rule, you should start there.
You gotta be the
I went-
I know, right?
very hard. That's what we do.
So, you're going to talk about flows. The one thing to keep in
I
mind,
wouldn't
we
know.
talk about it now or later, but what is a good principle for them to think about when they're selecting their CSS? I mean, in most organizations, you're going to have someone that's advanced enough with CSS to be the one that should be handling it. You know, with if you're doing CSS over there, you better kick it over here. And if I ask Todd to do an integration with CRM, I'm going to probably have him kick that over there. Just saying, I'm not sure. But if you're one of those people that has to do both, what's a good, if you're coming in after someone's already designed it,
it's a good baseline.
yeah, how do you figure out how you should target this? Because the typical thought there is, this is new, I need to get as specific as possible so I can get my style right to it.
And that's one of the problems that we have here is, so on the last IMG project I was working on, it was pretty much the exact same market patterns, the exact same thing was going on, just a horizontal navigation item that had just drop-down menus, and the market was pretty much the same, but I was writing one CSS to make it happen, and then Lisa was writing just a total different CSS to make it happen, and then that was on the main nav, and then on like just the one that had one drop-down, it was like a whole different CSS, even though it was the same market pattern, right? And so to get in there and figure out what Lisa was doing, you just have to pretty much inspect the element and just kind of see because CSS can either be clean and concise,
Show how to do that.
or it can just be wretched. So let's see.
I'm not sure. I mean, most developers out there don't even know that the developer toolbar, not the developer toolbar, but the inspection tools exist.
So if you're in Firefox, you can right-click and say inspect element. It's right there.
This works in Chrome and in IE11 as well, not
there
in
by default?
10 below.
Was that there by default, or you have to do an add-in or something?
No, it is there by default in all of them now.
Firebug is not part of Firefox. You have to
Say
install
that's an
that.
IE11?
Yeah,
It's
built in
IE11.
there. It's built in IE11.
Yeah.
Actually, it's built in IE10.
Well, it's built into 9 and 10, but not the right click inspect. You have to hit F12 or go to
But then,
developer.
and then browse to it, yeah.
And if you like CSS, and a lot of people like the inspect element. I don't know anything. I've only ever used Firebug, and I'm just set in my ways and old and just grumpy and curmudgeony. So I always have I go right to Firebug.
Firefox recently revamped theirs. Got a little praise.
Nice. So when you inspect the element, you simply inspect the element. Let's just pretend we have screen real estate, but so you just click and there, I'll show you again. You just click this little button here, and you'll get a blue nav around it. And so we want to look at the hero section. And then
What do
so
you mean by hero section?
The hero, it just first has the area you find on the page.
Are these inspect elements, are they pretty much the same across all the different browsers? Or are
yeah,
they-
it all pretty much works the same. Yep.
They're laid out slightly different. I mean, just personally, from a developer standpoint, I would say I probably have the most experience using Firefox. Because Firefox just always had like a raw view that you go look at. Then Google Chrome has very good tools I like using as well. With IE10, they brought some of that into Internet Explorer. IE11 brought even more, but it's not, I think it's really good, but it doesn't look like Firebug and Chrome, which is what I'm used to, so it takes me a little while to figure it out. But they all say the same information, just in a slightly different way. Like Firebug is really good for like layout, right? Because you can see like the margins and stuff. But IE11 might be a little bit easier to emulate, like because it has like a dedicated tag and just different tools that you might
There's
use.
some subtle differences in them, but these tools go far deeper than what we're showing here.
Oh, yeah.
To be honest, it's probably
Yeah.
a good topic for another.
Mm-hmm.
another user.
Sounds like a new speaker for June. that would be awesome.
I took an online course to do Chrome build.
Did you? That's awesome. Not to derail from this, but this tool allows you to debug JavaScript, make your resource requests that are coming in, your gets and your posts, and
Look at all your network.
how long it's taking each thing. Yeah, network request, how long it's taking each request to complete. It shows you the DNS lookup, the get, and when it's finalized.
It's like a cross with Fiddler and
It has like a Fiddler light. It's not quite as in depth as Fiddler is, but what they'll do is just on top of it. It's far better. Like you can see the cookies.
Oh, I got plenty of stuff to go through.
and stuff like that.
This typically works if you work up into the
Yeah, Firebug is different. Firebug's the one that started it all. That's been around for what, 7, 8 years now. It's been around for a long time. Google built it into their Chrome, a few years ago, and IE built it in starting in '99. IE11 has some advanced things that this doesn't have yet, where you can actually do geolocation stuff, and you can emulate a different location other than yourself. This is good if you're testing location-based services and things like that.
Okay, cool.
And you said this is already installed, so it's not like a plugin.
Well,
Firebug is the only one that is not.
That's a plugin that you have to put. However, Firefox does have some of this stuff built into it, but Firebug gives you a lot more. But that's a free plugin.
Thanks,
Firefox, you should download.
Stay tuned for Mike's presentation in June.
Show them that you can edit it right here too. Actually, I already did, but I don't think you can.
Why don't you dock it, Todd? Swipe it to the left. The other left. Now hit that middle red button.
Underneath, yes.
Oh shit. That one?
There you go. Now you can show them both at one time.
Exactly which one it was.
What do I know? I'm just a dumb developer.
You only know this because we showed it to you.
All right, so whenever I get somebody's project that I haven't done, I immediately I probably cry a little bit first because I know it's gonna be bad. And so immediately I jump and check out the source code through one of these inspect element. And so let's say I want to figure out who in the world, why would you ever? Okay, so the person did just nest a 3D.
Yeah.
You want to add it? Right place?
Oh, yeah.
So,
This way.
yeah, I don't know why Brian just ran away. It really scared
He's
me.
gonna give you
But
It's always gonna be sitting under drill, dude.
if you see what Todd's doing, he's changing that value right there, and it's automatically updated there in the browser.
No, this is great. I'm sorry, I'm trying to error.
To give you an idea of the value, again, I'm not trying to steal thunder from it or anything. I just had for DiscoverX project, I got a list that.
Talk it. You want to take over? Take it back over.
Rather than going
Yeah, I'll let everybody
into
get a piece.
CSS,
A pizza.
There's specific lines that I need to edit or anything. I would just do what needs to be done in here, and it tells you right there what line in the CSS file. So you do it, you figure out what it is, you go to that line, change it, done.
Let's save that for your presentation.
Yeah, Mike.
Digging into the tools.
For your
Well,
blog.
no, just this part, the tool is far deeper. No, I'm saying how I use this in my workflow.
Yeah. Todd, you opened Pandora's box, but.
No kidding. Way to hit F12, Todd.
It's a good segue though.
All right, so let's talk about floats.
All right, so I think a lot of the reasons why I think people use heights in web design is because the great collapse. That what happens whenever you float something.
Just talk over him, Todd.
Yep.
That's actually good.
No, go ahead.
So, gang, if you ever run into any problems with your layout, it's probably because of floats. There's only one real way to lay something out, and that's through floats. And so what is a float? A float is a CSS positioning property that's used for everything from text to laying out entire websites. And that's what we have here. We have a UL, and in it are LIs, and those LIs, there's 5 of them, and they're floated left with a margin on each side of it. And this one is correctly cleared, the clear float. You can tell because the UL is from here to here, and these 3, it collapsed. And it collapses because it just, all this stuff is removed from the context of the website, and so there's no, it has no reference anymore to calculate how high it needs to be, so it just collapses. It doesn't know any better. And that's why you get these three. Brian makes the mistake of coding like this. I'm going to show you 3 different ways to fix it. Brian makes one of these mistakes. Because there's more than one way to...
It worked.
Yes.
You realize I'm the one that pays you tonight.
Is he a pig?
Everybody, John had a very good writer. No, this is actually good because I thought this is what you're supposed to do. I thought you were supposed to float left and then you clear it.
He's a this stuff.
And so what Brian does, poorly, no, he does this very well, it's just not right. He does this actually very well.
I did do it right.
So the old school way to do it is just to throw a div down there with a class of clear, and that class links to something else that clears. So it's just throwing an extra element in there and saying clear it.
Actually, I would put that after whatever's floated. I thought that's what you're supposed to do.
Yeah, all these are.
You have it inside of the UL, but I would put it outside of that UL, but I would follow up whatever I'm floating with a div class clear.
And well, technically it would be a UL with a class of clear, but I mean an LI with a class of clear. This I don't think is valid, but just for the sake of.
It works. That works, but it's not.
But it still works, but it's not valid. Yeah.
1 pixel image.
So once I save it, it's actually linked to this one right here. So once I save it, it should fix itself, and it fixed itself.
Look at that.
Yeah.
It worked.
It does work. It does.
Yes.
There's also everybody else's favorite, and that's just you just tell the surrounding UL, just give it a class of just say overflow hidden, and that just fixes it magically. And so let's see, you got floats up there. There's that. So we just gave it a class of overflow hidden, pretty much.
Maybe it's overflow auto.
Or auto.
Yeah.
And overflow auto works too, but sometimes you'll get a scroll bar, and so browsers are stupid. And so then there's the correct way to do it, because and I'll show you. Yeah, that works, and it works like magic. But I'll show you in a second why not to use that.
That's fine. I just want to know how the hell you're supposed to do it. You can beat me up on the way, that's fine. You just have to tell me how.
All right, and then the third way, and the way that is the right way to do it nowadays, is called the clear fix hack. Just Google it, read about it if you care to read about it. And you're pretty much doing the exact same thing that Brian was mistakenly doing.
With a clear both, right?
Yeah. You're pretty much just you're pinning the element after the thing that needs to be floated, and you're doing the same thing only with pseudo elements. So there's no unsemantic just thrown in their markup for no reason.
So you just don't have a blank div in there. You actually put the attribute on the thing you're floating, and it knows to clear it afterwards.
With pseudo elements, with the before and after.
Does that actually generate code after your element if you do colon after?
No.
Okay, so it doesn't physically create markup, it just knows to clear it.
Yep, it just knows to clear it. And the only downside to this is you're using a pseudo element. You only get 2, and so. But I've never had a problem with that. But that is how you clear a float properly. Clear fix. And so instead of saying clear fix up here, just say CF, because that's what everybody does.
If overflow hidden works, why is this method better?
Show you.
Okay. Because technically it's more markup, so that's additional weight.
No kidding, it's like 0.6% of a byte that you're adding with those 17 characters. It's ridiculous time. Really to consider it if you're
I only get 200 megs on my data. I'll take it.
200 megs.
Brian counts as
Welcome to 2001.
That was a K.
Okay, no extra markup. All you need is one overflow hidden, and it fixes it automatically. Sweet. But with overflow hidden, let's say you have a image or something you want to absolutely position outside of that div. which I have graciously done already. I guess that's it, 3. Nope. So this one right here, it's absolutely positioned up and out. And so you're pretty much just removing, when you absolutely position anything, you're removing it from the entire context of the entire page. And it's only relative to either the page itself or the surrounding div. And I'll get to that in a minute, as long as you tell it to be relative. Anyway, so if you absolutely position something outside of something that says overflow hidden, well, it's anything that's overflowing that surrounding div is hidden. And so this should look like this. But since that one magical overflow hidden cuts everything off, this is what you get. And that's why you don't use overflow hidden on floated elements to clear them. That's just pretty much the only downside, but it's a pretty big downside. And you're going to ruin somebody's day, because somebody's going to come across this and just be like, what? Why? And one more little tutorial, I guess. All right, so you want to float these 2 left and have the text wrap around it. So it's pretty much simple. You just float them left. And that's a float image. They're just right here. There they are, those 2 images right there. So it's a float image, and then the next 2 images. So I'm just going to tell it to float right. There they are. And I've seen some weird stuff too, but so these are just simply floated right. And to get this one, I pointed like an idiot, to get this one down here, I've seen some craziness, right? So they're both floated right, and all you have to do...
I would probably clear the first one and then float the next one. That's how I would have done it. Is that right?
Clear that second one, just so they're both floated left, and now the second one clears the left, or clear right, and then...
Still doing better than me. I put it in a big table.
And that side of the office will not talk to that side of the office.
Terry's apparently still in 1997. He hasn't left. So what did you do that time? Did you clear the top one?
Yeah, you float both of them right, and then you clear the second one's going to clear the float of they're both floating.
Is it like on the before, I'm using pseudocode, is that what you did or no?
No, it's just simply, you just simply give it another class of
Your class is on the second.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah,
Clear doesn't work to clear anything underneath it. It only clears stuff on top of it.
Oh, I didn't. That's what I was getting at. Okay.
So there's that. So that is pretty much what Brian was doing wrong all those times.
Nice.
So,
Was I consistently wrong?
No, it works. It does work. It does work.
That's right.
to defend Brian a bit, that div class clear was something that was
Standard.
5 years ago. Like, even when I started, it wasn't until within the last year or 2 that the overflow hidden in the content actor and before really became well known.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem was div class clear became the standard that got translated on. We all found a better way to do it, and we didn't communicate it.
Yeah, more time you done.
No, I actually have a lot.
A lot more? Okay, well.
We thought you were going through it fast. That's why we're asking questions.
So let me just help you guys out with some type real quick, and we can. Yeah.
We're going to do a phase 2 in May or June with Mike.
Yeah. Those are cool. I don't know if the 2.5 hours. Think about it.
Depends on what website you're looking
No,
at.
I probably could do it. Just
Paul Irish would tend to disagree.
There's enough you can cover.
Oh, yeah.
All right. So that big body paragraph text right there. It's what is it? Lato from Google Fonts.
I don't think they care.
Anyway, it doesn't matter. But anyway, when you're looking at it, it's not bad, but it's not good. It's kind of all squished, and it's harder to read than it needs to be. If you see it, then fine. If not, then you're a programmer. You don't care about these things. Anyway, for the sake of, since content is king and you need everything that should be legible, just a couple little things to help you out. So when it's small text like this, and for some reason I see a lot of small text, and the way the web is going, bigger is better, just big text is good unless you need it to be. So just give it a class of, or just increase the leading or the kerning, the space between letters just a smidge, and you can do that with letter spacing and just a couple little classes. There we go. And then usually the line height needs to be increased a little bit, and 1.5 or 1.6 is usually a pretty good number. So with your type. And then nobody wants to read that much text ever. And so you're gonna always want to limit your line length. And this is just for you developers out there. To roughly that. And that's a lot more readable than that jumbled mess that you just looked at, right?
Someone did a study and generally the accepted line length is about 78 characters. So that is probably still
Like how much they want to read from left to right?
Yeah.
Or right to left?
Top to bottom.
Top to bottom. That's what I've been doing wrong. We started at the bottom and gone up.
It's a 3-column table.
That's how many it takes to get you to heckle. I like that. That's good to know.
Concerning is he's the one implementing processes for you. I'm a little concerned right now.
Mice will take me off the back.
Are you at a stopping point, Tom?
Yeah, I think everything just froze.
Oh, I guess that's a stopping point. You probably lost track of people.
Yep, I think it's frozen, gang.
Okay. Go ahead and wrap stuff and we'll grab some pizza.
Frozen.
So, to summarize, if I gather everything correctly, whatever we're doing is wrong.
Yes.
And
Yes.
we need to do it right.
Yes.
Or just not do it.
Or just-
have us do it.
Yes, that's what I was.
even better. I like that idea.
Don't make it more difficult.
I think I told Matt one time, I think one of the biggest differences between us and you guys is I would never touch what you guys do. And you guys are like, well, yeah, I could absolutely position that right here and give it a height. Why not? Why not? I would never.
No, you have to go and make it look good
I would
anyway.
never be like, I can do a farm. I can just stick this here and get and push, whatnot.
My
But
guess is that the only one of you that even attempts to write CSS is probably me. Kyle will write some if he asks me first.
I'll write some CSS.
On
On occasion.
from as I work with you.
Yeah, I mean, I've used it for years.
I do it after I make sure it's
Do you have any closing
They're
comments?
all coming on dogs right now.
let's see.
Apply the CSSers.
I'll stop the recording when you're done.
Oh, I was gonna say, so you know, HTML5 has a lot of different elements. I get upset a lot. Apparently, no. So whenever I read your code and it's nothing but an ocean of divs, it's like, but you know, they have header and aside and article and just use the HTML5 elements, and then everybody's like, well, can I use divs? By all means, use divs, but only use them when it makes sense. You know, just
They
make
just learn how to use divs instead of tables, one thing at a time.
true one thing at a time. We'll take it.
Only some of them that learn that.
But
Don't use front page.
well, just make sure that your whole entire markup structure isn't divs. Just make sure you throw the headers and you can use more than one header and more than one footer in there. Just make sure you name them, like I was saying earlier. Probably primary header, primary footer. Go from
There
there.
we go. We're doing everything wrong. You're doing it wrong, apparently. Well, this is the first time I've actually Todd's offered to speak, so I definitely wanted to take him up on it. As you can tell, he has a tremendous amount of CSS knowledge, much more so than us lowly table-using developers. But there's a lot of good information. I think, in all seriousness, I think what you're really saying is make sure you think about what you're doing. Don't blast CSS all over the place. Understand the CSS that you're putting in place and how it affects the rest of your code, how reusable it is, and don't put a div class clear after your floated elements. I have to go fix so many blog articles now because I have so many of those in there.
I thought it was us. I didn't know it was you guys. I was like, it's cool.
But anyway,
But it is.
I wanted to thank Todd personally again. And people presenting. So we'll get some pizza, and then I'll try to define what MVC stands for.
It's actually fun.
I need this.